"If you're a real man, tame my wild mule," the Apache mocked as 20 men tried and failed until one weathered rancher proved them all wrong. This is the story of pride, determination, and the most stubborn animal in all of Texas that would change everything anyone thought they knew about what it means to be truly strong. Deep in the heart of Brewster County, Texas, where the desert winds carry secrets and the sun burns truth into every soul, there lived an Apache elder named Running Bear who owned the most notorious mule in the entire American Southwest. This wasn't just any ordinary mule. This was a creature of legend, a beast so wild and untamable that cowboys would travel hundreds of miles just to witness someone attempt the impossible task of breaking her spirit. The mule, known simply as Thunder, stood 16 hands high with coal-black fur that seemed to absorb the very light around her, and eyes that burned with an intelligence that made grown men question whether they were looking at an animal or something far more mysterious. The story begins on a scorching July morning in 1887, when the small frontier town of Marathon was buzzing with excitement about the latest challenge issued by Running Bear. Word had spread like wildfire across Texas, New Mexico, and Arizona that the old Apache was offering $1,000 in gold to any man who could saddle, mount, and ride Thunder for just 60 seconds without being thrown. It was more money than most cowboys saw in 5 years, but the catch was simple yet terrifying. If you failed, you had to leave town immediately and never return, carrying the shame of defeat for the rest of your days. 20 of the finest horsemen in the territory had already accepted the challenge, and 20 had failed spectacularly. There was Big Jim Morrison from El Paso, who lasted exactly 4 seconds before Thunder sent him flying into a cactus patch. Then came Wild Bill Hutchinson from San Antonio, who managed 8 seconds before the mule performed a move that defied the laws of physics, spinning and bucking in ways that seemed almost supernatural. Even the legendary bronc rider Dutch Henderson, who claimed he could ride anything with 4 legs, lasted only 12 seconds before Thunder deposited him unceremoniously in the town's water trough. Each failure only added to Thunder's reputation and Running Bear's growing amusement. The Apache elder would sit in his weathered rocking chair outside the local saloon, his ancient face creased with knowing smiles as he watched another would-be conqueror limp away in defeat. But Running Bear wasn't just enjoying the spectacle for entertainment. There was something deeper at work here, something that connected to ancient Apache wisdom about the relationship between man and beast, about respect and understanding rather than domination and force. The 21st man to accept the challenge was unlike any of the others who had come before. Samuel Garrett was a quiet rancher from a small spread north of Marfa, a man in his 50s with silver-streaked hair and hands that showed the honest calluses of decades working with cattle and horses. He didn't boast or swagger like the younger cowboys. He didn't drink whiskey for courage or make grand speeches about his prowess with difficult animals. Instead, he simply approached Running Bear with the kind of respectful dignity that immediately caught the old Apache's attention. What made Samuel different wasn't just his age or his quiet demeanor. It was the way he looked at Thunder. While every other cowboy had seen a challenge to be conquered, a wild beast to be broken, Samuel saw something else entirely. He saw pain. He saw fear. He saw an animal that had been pushed beyond her limits by men who understood nothing about the delicate balance between strength and gentleness that true horsemanship required. This insight would prove to be the key that unlocked a mystery that had been 20 years in the making. The truth about Thunder's origins was known only to Running Bear, and it was a story that would shock everyone in Marathon when it was finally revealed. 20 years earlier, Thunder had belonged to a young Apache brave named Swift Hawk, Running Bear's own son. Swift Hawk had raised Thunder from a foal, treating her not as property but as a partner, a friend, a member of his family. The bond between them had been legendary among the Apache people, a connection so deep that it seemed to transcend the normal relationship between human and animal. But tragedy had struck during a cavalry raid on their village, when Swift Hawk was killed defending their people and Thunder was captured and sold to white settlers who had no understanding of her true nature. For 20 years, Thunder had passed from owner to owner, each trying to break her spirit through force and intimidation. Each failure had made her wilder, more distrustful, more determined never to submit to human control again. By the time she came back into Running Bear's possession through a complex series of trades and purchases, she had become the legendary wild mule that no man could ride. But Running Bear understood what others could not. Thunder wasn't wild by nature. She was grieving. She was protecting herself from further heartbreak by refusing to bond with any human who approached her with violence or arrogance. Samuel Garrett sensed this truth instinctively, even though he didn't know Thunder's history. As he prepared for his attempt, he did something that shocked everyone present. Instead of immediately trying to saddle her, he spent 3 hours simply sitting near Thunder's corral, not trying to approach her, not making demands, just being present with the kind of patient stillness that spoke of deep wisdom about animal behavior. The crowd grew restless, making jokes about the old rancher's strange tactics, but Running Bear watched with growing interest and something that might have been hope. When Samuel finally stood and approached Thunder, he moved with the slow, deliberate grace of someone who understood that trust could not be forced, only earned. He spoke to her in low, gentle tones, not trying to dominate but simply communicating respect and understanding. To everyone's amazement, Thunder allowed him to come closer than any man had in years. She didn't buck or rear or show the aggressive behavior that had become her trademark. Instead, she watched him with those intelligent eyes, as if trying to determine whether this human might be different from all the others. The first real shock came when Samuel placed his hand on Thunder's neck and she didn't pull away. A murmur of disbelief ran through the crowd of spectators who had gathered to witness what they expected would be the 21st failure. But Samuel wasn't moving with the urgency of a man trying to win a contest. He was moving with the patience of someone who understood that the real victory lay not in domination but in communication, in building a bridge of trust across the chasm of fear and pain that had separated Thunder from human contact for so long. The saddle went on without a fight, though Samuel took nearly an hour to complete the process, constantly reassuring Thunder with gentle words and patient movements. When he finally prepared to mount, the entire town seemed to hold its breath. This was the moment when every other cowboy had met defeat, when Thunder's legendary bucking ability had sent grown men flying through the air like rag dolls. But as Samuel settled into the saddle, something unprecedented happened. Thunder stood perfectly still. For 60 seconds that felt like an eternity, Samuel sat astride Thunder without a single buck, rear, or sideways jump. The mule that had been unrideable for 20 years stood calm and steady, as if recognizing something in this quiet rancher that she had been searching for all along. When the time was up and Samuel dismounted, the silence was deafening. No one could believe what they had just witnessed. The legendary wild mule had been ridden, but more than that, she had chosen to be ridden. Running Bear rose from his chair, tears streaming down his weathered cheeks, and walked slowly towards Samuel and Thunder. What he said next would reveal the final piece of a puzzle that had been 20 years in the making, a revelation that would change everything anyone thought they knew about this story. Looking at Samuel with eyes that seemed to peer directly into his soul, the old Apache spoke words that sent a chill through every person present. "Samuel," he said, "you have the same gentle spirit as my son Swift Hawk, who raised this mule from birth. Thunder remembers love when she feels it, and she has chosen to trust again." The mystery deepened when Running Bear revealed that Samuel bore an uncanny resemblance to Swift Hawk, not just in appearance but in the way he moved, the way he spoke to animals, the way he approached the world with quiet strength rather than loud boasting. Some in the town whispered about reincarnation, about spirits returning to complete unfinished business. Others spoke of coincidence, of the strange ways fate sometimes brings the right person to the right place at exactly the right time. But Running Bear believed something different, something that connected to ancient Apache beliefs about the eternal bonds between kindred spirits. As Samuel accepted the $1,000 in gold that he had rightfully earned, he made an announcement that surprised everyone even more than his successful ride. He didn't want the money. Instead, he asked Running Bear if he could purchase Thunder. Not to own her, but to give her the kind of home where she could finally heal from 20 years of grief and mistrust. The old Apache's response was immediate and decisive. Thunder was not for sale at any price, but she was free to choose where she wanted to live. If she chose to go with Samuel, she would go with Running Bear's blessing and the knowledge that she had found someone worthy of the love she had kept locked away for so long. What happened next would become the stuff of legend in the small towns scattered across the Texas desert. Thunder, the mule that had fought every attempt at human control for 2 decades, walked calmly out of her corral and followed Samuel to his horse trailer as if she had been waiting for this moment her entire life. She loaded without resistance, without fear, without any of the wild behavior that had made her famous across the American Southwest. It was as if she understood that her long journey through pain and isolation had finally led her to someone who could give her what she had been searching for. Not domination, but partnership. Not breaking, but healing. The story might have ended there, with Samuel and Thunder riding off into the sunset like characters in a dime novel. But life rarely provides such simple conclusions. What Samuel discovered about Thunder in the weeks that followed would reveal layers of intelligence and emotional depth that challenged everything he thought he knew about the nature of animals and their capacity for memory, grief, and forgiveness. Thunder didn't just remember Swift Hawk. She had been mourning him for 20 years, carrying her grief like a burden that had grown heavier with each passing day. Under Samuel's patient care, Thunder began to heal in ways that went far beyond the physical. The wild, aggressive behavior that had made her legendary gradually gave way to a gentleness and intelligence that amazed everyone who encountered her. She learned to trust again, but more than that, she learned to love again, forming a bond with Samuel that reminded everyone who witnessed it of the mysterious connection that had once existed between her and Swift Hawk. It was as if she had been waiting all along for someone who understood that true strength lay not in the ability to dominate, but in the wisdom to serve. The transformation was so complete that visitors to Samuel's ranch often found it hard to believe they were looking at the same animal that had terrorized cowboys across 3 states. Thunder became gentle enough for children to pet, intelligent enough to perform complex tasks without commands, and loyal enough to follow Samuel around his property like a devoted dog. But the most remarkable change was in her eyes. The burning defiance that had characterized her for so long was replaced by something that looked remarkably like peace, as if she had finally found what she had been searching for through all those years of pain and resistance. Running Bear visited the ranch several times during Thunder's first year with Samuel, and each visit confirmed what he had suspected from the beginning. This wasn't just a story about a cowboy taming a wild mule. This was a story about healing, about the power of gentleness to accomplish what force never could, about the mysterious ways that love finds a way to survive even the darkest chapters of loss and grief. The old Apache began to speak of Samuel and Thunder as proof that some bonds transcend death, that love once given truly never dies, but simply waits for the right moment to bloom again. The final revelation came on a warm spring evening exactly 1 year after Samuel had successfully ridden Thunder for those historic 60 seconds. As Samuel was grooming Thunder in his barn, she did something she had never done before. She pressed her forehead against his chest and made a sound that was part whinny, part sigh, and entirely human in its emotional resonance. In that moment, Samuel understood with crystal clarity what Running Bear had known all along. Thunder hadn't been fighting humans for 20 years. She had been protecting her capacity to love from those who would never understand its value. The story of Samuel and Thunder spread far beyond the borders of Texas, becoming the kind of legend that grows with each telling, inspiring countless other stories about the mysterious bonds between humans and animals. But for those who knew the truth, who understood the real story behind the headlines and the folklore, it was something much simpler and much more profound. It was proof that patience can accomplish what force never could, that understanding is more powerful than dominance, and that sometimes the wildest spirits are simply the most wounded, waiting for someone with the wisdom to see past their defenses to the gentle heart that beats beneath. Years passed, and Samuel and Thunder became fixtures of the Texas landscape, their story inspiring a generation of cowboys to approach their work with greater respect for the animals in their care. Running Bear lived long enough to see his belief in the eternal nature of love vindicated, watching with deep satisfaction as Thunder flourished under Samuel's care, finally free to express the gentle nature that had been buried beneath 20 years of defensive behavior. When the old Apache finally passed away, his last words were about Swift Hawk and Thunder, about love that transcends death and finds new ways to express itself in each generation. Samuel continued to care for Thunder until she died of old age, 25 years after that fateful day in Marathon when she chose to trust again. Even in death, she remained gentle, passing away peacefully in the barn where she had known such happiness, surrounded by the human who had given her the greatest gift possible, the freedom to love without fear. Samuel buried her on a hill overlooking his ranch, marking her grave with a simple stone that read, Thunder, who taught us that the gentlest spirits are often hidden behind the fiercest defenses. The legacy of their story continues to inspire new generations of people who work with animals, serving as a reminder that true mastery lies not in the ability to dominate but in the wisdom to understand, not in the power to break but in the patience to heal. In a world that often celebrates force and aggression, the story of Samuel and Thunder stands as a testament to the enduring power of gentleness, the triumph of understanding over ignorance, and the miraculous ways that love finds a path through even the darkest wilderness of pain and loss. The sun was setting over Samuel's ranch on a quiet evening in late autumn, painting the Texas sky in shades of gold and crimson that seemed to mirror the peaceful contentment that had settled over the land. Samuel, now in his 70s with hair as white as winter snow, sat on his porch watching Thunder graze in the pasture where she had spent the happiest years of her life. At 32 years old, Thunder had lived far longer than most mules, her longevity perhaps a testament to the healing power of love and the peace that had replaced decades of inner turmoil. As the months passed, Samuel began to notice subtle changes in his beloved companion. Thunder moved more slowly, spent longer hours resting in the shade of the old oak tree near the barn, and seemed to gaze into the distance with the contemplative expression of someone preparing for a great journey. There was no sadness in her demeanor, no fear of what was to come. Instead, there was a profound sense of completion, as if she had accomplished everything she had been meant to do in this world and was ready to move on to whatever awaited beyond. On a crisp December morning, Samuel found Thunder lying peacefully beneath her favorite oak tree, her breathing shallow but calm. He knew immediately that her time had come, and he spent the entire day sitting beside her, stroking her neck and speaking softly about all the adventures they had shared together. He told her about the impact their story had made on countless others, how their partnership had changed the way people thought about the relationship between humans and animals, how her journey from wild defiance to gentle trust had become a source of inspiration for anyone struggling to overcome their own wounds. As the sun began to set on Thunder's final day, something extraordinary happened. A gentle breeze stirred the desert air, carrying with it the faint sound of Apache flute music that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Samuel felt a presence beside him, invisible but unmistakable, and he knew without looking that running bear and swift hawk had come to guide Thunder home. Thunder's eyes brightened one last time, focusing on something Samuel couldn't see, and her expression filled with the kind of joy that comes only from long-awaited reunion. With her final breath, Thunder pressed her muzzle against Samuel's hand in a gesture of pure love and gratitude. In that moment, Samuel understood that their story had never really been about a cowboy taming a wild mule. It had been about healing, about the power of patience and understanding to overcome any barrier, about the eternal nature of love that transcends species, transcends death, transcends all the artificial boundaries that humans create in their limited understanding of the world. Samuel buried Thunder on the hill overlooking his ranch, just as he had promised, but the grave didn't feel like an ending. Instead, it felt like a celebration of a life fully lived, a journey completed, a love story that had touched the hearts of everyone who heard it. In the years that followed, people would travel from across the country to visit Thunder's resting place, drawn by a story that reminded them of the gentle strength that lies at the heart of all true connection between living beings. The legend of Samuel and Thunder became more than just a tale told around campfires or in dusty saloons. It became a teaching story, passed down from generation to generation, reminding each new group of listeners that the wildest spirits are often the most wounded, that patience can accomplish what force never could, and that sometimes the greatest act of strength is the willingness to approach another being with gentle respect rather than domination. Samuel lived for many more years after Thunder's passing, continuing to work with difficult horses and troubled animals, always applying the lessons he had learned from his partnership with the legendary wild mule. He never claimed to have tamed Thunder, always insisting that she had chosen to trust him, that the real miracle had been her capacity for forgiveness and her willingness to love again after 20 years of protecting her heart from further pain. When Samuel finally passed away at the age of 89, the people of Marathon buried him beside Thunder on the hill overlooking his ranch. His headstone bore a simple inscription that captured the essence of their remarkable partnership. Samuel Garrett, who understood that true mastery lies not in breaking spirits but in healing them. Together, they rest in the Texas soil they both loved, their story living on as proof that love, patience, and understanding can overcome any obstacle, heal any wound, and bridge any gap between different hearts seeking connection. Today, visitors to that hill outside Marathon can still feel the presence of something extraordinary, something that speaks to the deepest truths about the bonds that connect all living things. The wind still carries echoes of Apache flute music on certain evenings, and sometimes travelers report seeing the ghostly figures of a man and a mule walking peacefully together across the desert landscape, their forms shimmering in the heat like mirages, but their message is clear as the brilliant Texas sky, that love once given truly never dies, but finds new ways to express itself in each generation, waiting patiently for hearts wise enough to recognize its eternal call. And so the story of Thunder, the wild mule who chose to trust again, continues to inspire all who hear it, reminding us that beneath every defensive exterior beats a heart capable of extraordinary love, waiting only for someone with the wisdom to see past the surface to the gentle spirit within.